Hi, everyone. I'm Tracey Gazelle and jumping in live today for a workshop. We're live on LinkedIn and it's about how to improve your public speaking skills. So, thanks to everyone who RSVP'd to the event. Thanks to everyone who's here live. Thanks to everyone who's watching on the replay or watching this somewhere else. Hi to everyone. If we haven't met yet, I'm Tracey Gazelle. I'm a consultant, I'm a coach, I'm a #1 best-selling author. I'm a speaker. LinkedIn also just named me a top voice for stress management and for executive coaching. So that's really exciting. I love that. Love all those things. And what I do is I equip leaders with the tools to lead with mental clarity and calm composure in high stress roles. So I work primarily with leaders, but I also work with all kinds of different people as well. I'm not going to go too far into about me because I want this to be about you today. So if you'd like to learn more about me, you're welcome to check out my LinkedIn page. There's lots of info there, my history, my education. Also, my website, traceygazelle.com, has information about me. And I also have free workshops on there, blog, all kinds of things as well. So that's traceygazelle.com. Let's jump right into the workshop. And I will mention as well that because I'm streaming through another platform, I can't see who's here live. But if you have questions, comments, you're welcome to write them into the comment section underneath this event in LinkedIn, and I will see your comments. So if you have any questions, I love answering questions live. So please drop them into the comments. Or if you just like to say hi, I always like seeing that as well, seeing who's here on the workshop. So let's get right into it. So we're talking about improving your public speaking skills. And this is something that comes up often with the clients that I work with. I work with a lot of executives, leaders, CEOs who do a lot of public speaking. And I often get asked these questions. And so when I get asked these types of questions multiple times, it inspires me to create a workshop around them. It must be a question on many people's minds, which is what I assume. And so then I create these workshops to help more people. And with public speaking, there's of course many different facets to public speaking, but today we're going to be talking about the mindset piece of it. So how to face if you have some nerves going up to it, you find you have racing thoughts going up to a big presentation, a lot of thinking, maybe you're losing sleep a bit about the public speaking that you're about to do. So we're going to talk about the nerves leading up to it, having a clear state of mind going into it, as well as how to remain confident while doing public speaking. And I see Chris. Hey, Chris. Nice to see you. Yeah, StreamYard. That's exactly what I'm streaming on is StreamYard. Yeah, great. Thanks for being here live, Chris. That's nice to see you. So, okay, so let's get into it. So the first piece is let's talk about the nerves. So nerves are common. And when I say nerves, I mean a physiological response. So you have some kind of public speaking gig coming up or a speech or a presentation that you're doing. You might be doing slides, you might be speaking a memorized speech, it might be any of those things. It's really, really common. Oh, hi, Tony. Nice to see you too. Aw. It's really common to have a physiological response prior to your speech or your presentation. And a physiological response is something like your hands start sweating, your heart is racing, you feel clammy, you feel shaky hands. And that physiological response is really common. Oh, and Santi, oh, we got so many people here. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching live. So that physiological reaction, you might be getting it a couple days prior to the event. It might be keeping you up at night. You might have racing thoughts. And you might notice that they start to increase, right? So that physiological response, it gets stronger as you get closer and closer to the event. And so there are scientific studies that have studied this physiological response. And so it does continue to increase. So you might feel more sweaty, more clammy, more shaky, more nervous as you get closer and closer to the event. And then what happens is right when you're about to start speaking or presenting, I mean, the minute before they call your name, they bring you up. Scientific studies have shown that that is the crux of the physiological response. So that is going to be the height of your physiological response. So you're shaking the most, you're the sweatiest, you're the most nervous. That happens right the minute when your presentation starts. And then these studies show that it actually, right after you start, it tapers off. That's how this always works. So you have the most physiological nerves just before you start speaking. And then as soon as you start speaking, it tapers off. And that is a completely normal physiological response. Everybody has this. As far as I know, professional speakers as well, they still get very nervous. It's a physiological response of our bodies to going on stage and speaking to a lot of people. And so the next time that you have some kind of speech or presentation to do and you notice yourself getting nervous beforehand, you're backstage or you're in the boardroom or whatever it is, and you're waiting to be called on to stand up and give your talk, and you notice, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. My heart's racing, my hands are sweaty, all those things. Remind yourself that that is a completely normal physiological response to be having. And you're in the worst of it, the thick of it, just before you get called. So all that you have to do is take deep breaths and just remind yourself you're in the worst of it and it is just about to taper off. And as soon as you start speaking, that physiological response and those nerves will start to taper off as soon as you start going, and it'll go away. And that's a completely normal response. And, especially if you have prepared yourself, you've got your slides all ready to go, your data you're presenting on, maybe you've memorized a speech, you've done all the groundwork, so you are prepared. And it's important to remember that. So you've done everything that you can do to prepare yourself, and then you are having a normal physiological response on top of all that. And that is a completely normal thing to happen. Oh, Christopher, hi, or Chris, hi. Thanks for being here as well. It's really great. I love everyone saying hi because it's nice to know who's in here. So that's a key thing that has helped me so much. I remember I learned that back when I was taking my psychology degree, that is a normal physiological response to public speaking. And if that happens to you, remind yourself it's completely normal and it will taper off as soon as you get started. And then the other piece I wanted to talk about is the mindset. So another common response, so if that's the physiological response, let's talk about the mental response, the psychological response, is to have that kind of chittering, chattering inner critic, that monkey mind that we all have, those looping thoughts, the racing thoughts, the fear, the doubt thoughts that are starting to say, oh, is this going to go bad? What's going to go wrong? Am I going to bomb? Are they going to ask me questions I don't know the answer to? Your mind starts to go into all the worst case scenario situations. I'm curious if that's resonating with anyone who's watching this. I know that for myself, my mind likes to do that. It likes to go to the worst case scenario situations. And it's interesting because if we look at this from an evolutionary psychology point of view, it's almost like a caveman response, because we have been programmed since the caveman days to assume the worst case scenario for survival purposes. um, I remember I learned when I was doing my neuroscience certification, the example that they used is if a caveman is walking down a path and there are berries on a bush, but the caveman misses seeing those berries on the bush, right? So berries are something positive, but the caveman misses seeing those berries, so it misses the positive outcome, right? Versus a caveman walking down a path and missing a saber-toothed tiger hiding in a bush. So the saber-toothed tiger, of course, is a negative outcome. So you can see then that the caveman missing the negative outcome, right? Not seeing the saber-toothed tiger versus missing the positive outcome, not seeing the berries. It's much more dire to miss the negative outcome. Like it's much like the caveman's probably going to die, right? If they miss seeing the saber-toothed tiger. And so over hundreds of thousands of years, longer, probably millions of years, our brains have been programmed to look for the worst case scenario, to look for what could go wrong, what could be bad, the negative outcome for survival. Because in the caveman days, it was a matter of survival, right? If you miss that saber-toothed tiger, if you miss the worst possible scenario, you're probably going to die. Now, here we are, fast forward to 2024, we're sitting in boardrooms, we're sitting in offices, on stages, giving presentations and meeting in meetings. Yet, that's our modern day saber-toothed tiger is the boardroom. And so our brains are still hardwired to look for the worst case scenario. We're looking for what could go wrong, and our brains are still looping through that information as a means of survival. Our brains are trying to protect us, but it's not the same anymore, is it? So sitting in a boardroom, it's not like we're going to die if we miss something in our presentation, but that's kind of what our brains are telling us. It's interesting. And so the best thing you can do then is start to notice that that's just how the brain likes to respond. That is a habit. That is a defense mechanism. That is an old caveman response to trying to survive is our brains thinking the worst. So you have this upcoming presentation or you're doing a speech and your brain starts to go into overdrive. Right? It's wondering what could go wrong? Are they going to ask me something I don't know the answer to? What's the worst thing that could happen? And so the best thing you can do is just start to notice that. Notice that thought. Because this is your reminder that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who is noticing your thoughts, right? That's the real you. So you are noticing your thoughts. You're noticing your thoughts about what could go wrong. How bad can this go? What are they going to ask me that I don't know? All those worst case scenario options. So that part of you that's noticing your thoughts, that is the quiet part of you. That is the stillness. That's your calm center that I often talk about. That's the part of you that's unchanged. That's always peaceful, content, that calm center. It's the space that meditators access when they meditate. Every single person has inside of them this calm center. It's always quiet, it's always content, and it's always peaceful. And that's the part of you that is noticing the type of thinking that you're having. Right? So some days we might be having these really wonderful thoughts. Oh, wow, life is so amazing, rainbows and butterflies, and aren't I lucky? And la la la, everything's great. And some days we might have dark, scary thoughts. Everybody does, by the way. Judgmental, dark, grief, sad, angry, frustrated, those dark thoughts no one likes having. We all have those too. But what's important to note here is that the real you is the part of you that's noticing the difference in your thinking, right? You are not your thoughts. You are the one that is objectively noticing your thoughts. Because once you start to notice and realize that you are the one noticing your thoughts, and you start to create that separation, that's when everything starts to shift because you're not wedded to your thinking. So if you're going into a big presentation or a speech and you're noticing your thoughts are running away from you, scaring you, making you think the worst is going to happen, feeling a lot of fear, self-doubt that the worst is going to happen, you can catch yourself. You can remind yourself, "Oh, I'm not wedded to my thinking. Just because I'm thinking a thought doesn't mean that it's true. Just because I'm thinking a thought doesn't mean that I have to follow it. I can pause and notice, is this true? Or is this a habit?" Right? For so many of us thinking the worst case scenario, that can be a habit of thought. And we don't have to think that, especially if it isn't true. So I talk a lot about the space of mental clarity. Right? I said earlier on this call that I help leaders lead with mental clarity. And mental clarity is that space, that is your calm center, that is noticing your thinking. And it comes in on a really nice feeling. So some of my clients call that feeling calm, peaceful, free, quiet, still. What else have I heard? The void, peaceful. That is the space of your mental clarity. And mental clarity is not having lots of thoughts. It's the part of you noticing that you're having a lot of thoughts. But it's a whole other space. And it's here now. It's even here as we're talking about it. So it comes through on a nice feeling. So, as I've been talking, you might notice I weave in and out of neuroscience, psychology, meditation, Buddhism, Taoism. So, the ancient texts from sages from thousands of years ago, weave it in with neuroscience, evolutionary psychology. It is really all connected. So, I do want to pause and just see if anyone has any questions with everything I've been saying, um, or if you just want to say hi. Oh, Tony says, I've heard it called the empty box. That's a great one too. I like empty box. I like empty container or empty bowl because especially that word empty, when I kind of focus my mind on being an empty bowl or an empty container, that helps me empty those thoughts. And the more that we empty those habitual thoughts that like to run, 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 and race and loop through, the more that we quiet those down, the easier it is to access that space of mental clarity where common sense comes through. So it's not that we aren't able to function if we quiet our thoughts. It's that we clear and make space. We clear the mental noise and make space for common sense, for a clear next action step. And so, yeah, thanks, Tony. So the empty box. So if we apply that to doing a presentation or a speech, if we go into our speech with an empty box, which is kind of what I like to do when I start speaking, I empty my mind. I have this empty box, this empty container, and from that space comes mental clarity and comes what wants to be said. So it's kind of how I'm even sharing this workshop. I had a couple bullet points of what I wanted to talk about, and I know where I want to come from, but I'm speaking from that space of mental clarity versus reading a script. So it's quite different. So thanks, Tony. Yeah, empty box, great. Anyone else have any questions or comments before I go on a little further? We're already halfway through. Yeah. Great. Well, let's talk about that space then, because it feels really nice to just continue there with improving public speaking skills. And so this does relate to the concept of confidence. So I've worked with clients in the past who had really big meetings coming up where they were presenting to their CEO or CFO or COO, and they'd been preparing for weeks with the data and creating their slides. And then they had a lot of thinking about how is this going to be received, and will I be able to answer all the questions that they ask me, and all that kind of thing. And I remember one of my clients said to me, I'm so nervous that I almost feel like a turtle that gets nervous and then wants to hide in my shell because that those nerves are so great, and that self-doubt was so strong. And so, what's interesting about that concept of self doubt and feeling really nervous and almost worried about a presentation is, instead of hiding away from it because those feelings are so uncomfortable and the thinking is so uncomfortable and can keep us up at night, instead of hiding away from it, what actually seems to work the best is leaning into it. So, any uncomfortable feelings that you have about public speaking, doing a presentation, instead of hiding away from the uncomfortable feeling, it's leaning into it. And when you lean into it, something interesting happens where what looked so big and hairy and scary, it just kind of falls away. And it's a bit intangible for me to describe here, but I've seen this happen in myself and so many of my clients. The more that we lean into uncomfortable feelings, the more that we realize that it was just that. It was just a thought, it was just a feeling, it wasn't real. And it just kind of falls away. And so that seems to be a really great secret tool, is to lean into whatever is causing you discomfort. Because we are always feeling our thinking, right? Like we are feeling our thoughts. We're not feeling the world around us. And this is why some people really enjoy public speaking and find it easy, and others find it really hard and intimidating and scary. And isn't public speaking, the last I heard, but this was back when I did my psychology degree, like, oh my gosh, almost 20 years ago, public speaking was the number one fear in the world, and number two was death. Like, how are more people afraid of public speaking than of dying? Right? Like, a lot of people find this really scary. Um, but the differences in people, why some people find it so terrifying and others don't, it's because we're thinking about it differently. We're making it up with our thoughts. Everything outside of us in the world is neutral. So, public speaking, doing a speech, doing a presentation, that act itself, that is neutral. That has no charge. It's not a positive experience. It's not a negative experience. It's not good or bad. It's neutral. It has no meaning, no category until we think about it. And then each of us individually, how many 8 billion people in the world now? Each of us individually, then we think about it. And we think, well, public speaking or, anything in life, we think about it. Is this good? Is this bad? Do I like this? Do I not like this? We give it meaning. We're meaning making machines. So we make it up. So you can make up public speaking to be scary, terrifying. No, thank you. Don't want to do that. Or you can make up public speaking to be, oh, out of my comfort zone, or oh, exciting, or oh, I'm going to have a physiological response and then I'll survive. I won't die. I'll be okay. We all get to make up the experience because we're all making everything up through our thinking. And then we're feeling our thinking. So, whatever we're making up with our thinking, then we feel it. Right. So, if I'm making up public speaking to be scary and daunting and overwhelming and all those things, I'm going to be feeling that. I'm going to feel, oh, probably pressure, heart racing, tension, all those things because I'm feeling my thinking. Or I can make it up to be something else. I can make it up to be exciting. And everything in life is like this. Isn't that fascinating? Everything from brushing your teeth to relationships to marriage to the workplace, absolutely everything in the world is made up by our thinking, and we get to choose what we make it up to be. Now, I know that's pretty wild if that's the first time you've heard it. And I know, like, when I first heard this, I thought, well, there's got to be some things in life that are always good or always bad. And I mean, a good example is money. So there's some people in the world that if you were to give them $20, it would absolutely blow them away. That's a lot of money to them. Some people in the world, you'd give them $20 and it's like pennies. It's nothing. It's not a big deal. And that's the different ways that we think about money and the value that we place on it. It's the same for everything. Sure, there are some things that are inherently morally considered bad and wrong. And there are some things that are considered morally good. But our experience of life and how we choose to walk around in our life and make up experiences is created by our thinking. So time's going fast. So to sum this up then, and then I'll ask again for questions to see if there are any. Um, Physiological response is normal, right? Nerves before a speech or a presentation are normal. Remind yourself when you're in the thick of it, feeling maybe overwhelmed by sweaty palms, racing thoughts, shaking, any of that, that is normal, and that will start to taper off as soon as you start talking. It will go away as soon as you start talking. You just have to start talking and it'll go away. It's also a normal-ish response that we think of the worst case scenario. That's an old caveman mentality to look for the worst thing that could happen. But just because you think that doesn't mean you need to listen to that thought. That's just a habit. That's just almost an evolutionary habit that so many of us do. We look for the worst case scenario. To have that thought is okay. Just remind yourself that you don't have to dwell on it. It doesn't need to take up too much headspace for you, thinking that the worst thing is going to happen. If you're feeling doubt or fear or worry going into your speech and you want to improve your confidence, lean into those bad feelings, lean into the discomfort that the speech, the presentation is bringing forward for you. Lean into it and you'll see that they will fall away because they're not real. They're made of thought. Those discomfort feelings are made of thought and they aren't actually real. But if we hide from them rather than lean into them, we'll never see that. We'll continue to hide from them. So lean into them so that they can fall away. And then remember that we're making up our experience. We're making up every experience with our thinking. And so public speaking, we're making that up. So for everyone who's watching this, how do you make up public speaking? What are your thoughts about it? What do you think if you were to get on stage right now? What would you expect to happen? And however you're making it up, know that that's okay, but know that it's not ironclad. It's your thinking about it. And because it's just thinking, it can be changed. It's malleable. You can reroute that in your brain to be a different experience. You can expect something new to happen. And that's another way to improve confidence is realize that it's just your thinking of what you're expecting to happen. All right. So I feel like that was a lot packed into under 30 minutes. I'm going to pause there and see if there's other questions. Chris, Tony, Santi, Chris, or anyone else who's in live. And also, if you're watching this on the replay, I do still love reading your questions and your comments. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn or YouTube, feel free to drop comments, questions beneath the video where you're watching this, and I'm happy to respond to questions and comments after the fact. If you enjoy workshops or this type of information that's a little bit different than maybe what you've heard before, I do have more videos on a YouTube channel. I've got a free workshop on my website called How to Quiet Racing Thoughts. If you're someone who has racing thoughts that don't turn off at the end of the workday, maybe it's waking you up in the night and impacting your sleep, I have a free workshop on my website, traceygazelle.com. So just go on over there and watch a workshop similar to this where I'll help you with racing thoughts. Oh, Santi, does the anxiety when facing public speaking greater with people with trauma, and how do we help them get through it? That's a great question, and it's got a big answer. So trauma is a big topic these days. Trauma is a word lately that's been used in psychology to describe, something that's happened in the past, something traumatizing. Um, and with trauma, so for example, what I would consider my traumatic thing that happened in my life is my dad passing away from this terrible disease. That was kind of my thing I would refer to as my trauma. But the interesting thing about trauma is that for me to relate to my experience that happened in the past, I can only do that through my thinking because anything traumatic that has happened to us in the past is not happening now in the present moment. And we keep that trauma, that traumatic event alive by thinking about it through our thoughts. And yes, there are varying levels of experiences. Of course, some people have been through some pretty terrible things. However, they are still brought to life today through thought. And so, in short, if we're looking at it in terms of public speaking, it's still part of the same conversation where if we're feeling some anxiety or apprehension about speaking due to a traumatic event that's happened to us in the past, it may be helpful to still look at the traumatic event, that trauma, as another thought. So, in the same way where I was saying some thoughts that might be getting in the way is thinking the worst thing's going to happen and they're not going to hear me or I'm not going to be able to answer their questions, as well as another thought could be about that traumatic event that happened. That is another thought that is getting in the way of speaking publicly. And so to achieve that space of mental clarity would be clearing all thoughts, even the really mundane ones about what you had for breakfast and the big hairy thoughts about something traumatic that happened in the past, and recognizing that they are all thoughts that are clouding the mental clarity that is optimal for public speaking. So then emptying your mind of all thoughts that cause anxiety to then do your speech. So, how do we help them get through it is the space of clearing all thoughts, all thoughts. And that's another big topic that I could even do another call on, Santi. And you and I can also talk about this if you like. We're friends, we live in the same city. But that's a really great question. So, I hope that I answered that for you in a succinct way. Tony says, any advice on what to do to regroup when the presentation spotlight is going awry? Yes. Should we take a second to physically pause and stop talking? Yes. Great question. And I can relate to this one as well, which is part of why I don't really like streaming platforms because I can't get a gauge on where everyone is at. But that is so key when you're doing a presentation and something has gone awry. Yes, it's so great to pause and check in. And so to check in with people, the best way you can do that is to see how present they are. So if you're giving a presentation and people are starting to their eyes are glazed over, they're looking away, they're zoning out, they're really not there. That is your cue as the presenter to pause and regroup because you've lost their attention. Something has gone awry. And so, yes, physically pausing is huge, although we're often told that we need to keep this steady momentum going and blah, 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 have the perfect speech. But I would argue that, yes, as you said, Tony, pause and stop talking. And if we're talking about this in terms of what I'm saying with mental clarity, then when we do that pause, we get grounded, we slow it down, we calm ourselves down, we access that space, that calm center, we reconnect in ourselves. And then when we do that, when we find that nice feeling again, that calm center feeling where we're speaking through, then we re-engage from that space. And it might be a little awkward for a few seconds as you do that pause, right? And people are like, "Well, why did she or he stop talking?" You could say, "Oh, I'm just gonna pause here for a sec." Do what you need to do to take your pause, reground yourself. And when you reground yourself, you will help others reground. And another way to do that is to ask people questions. That's why I like to pause when I do these. And I'll say, does anyone have any questions? Or how's this landing on you? I'm checking in with the audience. I'm grounding myself and I'm making sure that we're all still connected and we're having this conversation together. So that is so key, and it's okay to pause and it's okay to stop talking, and I would argue it's of benefit to do so. So that is a really great question, Tony. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, we're already over time. If anyone has questions they prefer to ask me privately, that's totally fine. I get those too. So send me a question on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to answer. Send me an email. And thanks to everyone again for taking the time out of your busy day to watch this. I hope it was of benefit. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye, everyone. Take care.